we move to the next presentation by Professor Lucio de Sousa. Professor de Sousa is Associate Professor at the Tokyo University of Foreign Studies, and he has worked extensively on issues relating to diaspora in Japan, Indian diaspora in Japan, and Japanese diaspora in India. He is going to make a two-fold presentation, two-stage presentation. This will be on how Indian diaspora fared in Japan and vice versa. Over to Professor de Sousa.
Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to thank you for the invitation, and I hope you enjoy my presentation. So this topic, it's a very complicated and complex topic, so I try to make it simple for you to understand and enjoy. Can you see my PowerPoint? Yes? Okay.
Yes.
So I will start. So I will focus my attention on the Indian diaspora in Japan, and secondly, on the Japanese diaspora in India in the early modern period. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes.
Yes? Okay. So today's topics, just a moment.
Okay. I think there's no problem.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, my apologies. Something happened with my Zoom. Can you see now?
Yes. Yes.
My presentation?
Yes.
So I will divide today's topics in 6 parts. Firstly, I will talk about the maritime routes. Then I will focus my attention on the Indian presence in Japan. I will give 2 main examples. After that, I will talk about the Japanese presence in India. And I will study a bit and show you a bit of the multicultural Asian community living in Goa. I will also explain you the ballot system. And finally, I decided to also talk about the Japanese from Goa living in the Americas. So I'm trying to cross-check 2 different approaches. One is a global history, and then micro-history, okay? So let's start by talking on the structure of the Portuguese slavery in Japan. So there is a connection that is very important, but is not very well studied. So we have lists of merchants here, but we do not have the complete list of private merchants that traveled here. So we have the official list, but not the private list. So I will try here to combine both. So there is an important connection. An important connection that links Goa to Japan through the city of Macau. I'm here also talking about invisible people. Why invisible people? Because when I started studying history, one of the things that really bothered me was a colonial Eurocentric perspective, and the fact that we have a history made about an historiographical approach that contains narratives made by elites, but we do not have the history of the common people, the invisible ones, the unseen ones. And I always thought that was the simple, invisible people that built the empires. So I wanted to do the other way around. So we today will explore a bit of this unknown world of the invisible people, the common people that are not kings or queens or rajas. So they are just simple human beings trying to survive in a world that sometimes is very difficult and presents difficult challenges. So returning to my topic, the arrival of Indians in Japan, of course, is associated with the Portuguese during the 16th and 17th centuries. So annually, the ships departed from Goa to Malacca, and from there, Macau, and finally to the main harbors of Kyushu, Hirado, Kuchinotsu, and finally Nagasaki. But in fact, this maritime route was connected to other main routes. In fact, a global route. And it was through these maritime routes interconnected that many Indians and also Japanese traveled. Regarding the Portuguese commercial journeys to Japan, I just will give you a small idea of it. So here I try to combine the origin of the ships before their arrival to Japan, the destination, and also to check combine the private and official trades. Why is this list so important? Because if we start studying the crew, we will find there the Indian presence. So this is, at least for me, the most important source of information on the Indian presence in Japan. I could give you many examples of it, but I decided just to talk about two. One is the 6040s delegation. It's a kind of commercial and at the same time political embassy. And the second one is about an individual from India called Ventura. He worked for Eizo Suetsugu, finding Christians and priests in Nagasaki in the same period that a Goan vessel arrived at Nagasaki. Regarding the first topic, the 1640s delegation, so on 6th July of 1640, this Goan vessel arrived at Nagasaki from Macau. Usually, these big ships that were built in Goa or in Cochin, and that we find in Biobus, they were not built as most people think in Europe. They are black ships because they were built with teak. They had also a kind of petrol over them, and they used, of course, the European technology. But they were bigger than any European galleon. So they could transport at least minimum 500 members. And I'm not talking about the slaves. So this one that I'm talking here now, it's a smaller one. It's not a big ship. That was a kind of diplomatic and commercial ship. It contained only 74 people. And this is very interesting because it's possible to identify inside, among the Portuguese that were born in Goa, in Cochin, in Dio, and also in Lisbon, in Europe, but also many servants, invisible people from different regions of Asia and Africa. So this is one of the lists of this delegation that we can find in the Vatican. But in fact, we have several copies, and we have reports made by some of these invisible people that I'm mentioning you. But just to give you an idea of the composition of the crew, we have servants from the region of Bengal, from China, Philippines, Southeast Asia, so Indonesia, but many also from Malabar, Malayans, Mozambique, Timor, Solar, so people from everywhere. And also elite from Goa. So the other is Ventura's case. Ventura's case is very interesting for me because it's focused in Nagasaki, in the ending period of the Portuguese connections, maritime connections with Japan, with this city. But in fact, he's a second-generation Indian. So he's the son of one of the first Indians that arrived with the Jesuits in Japan. In fact, in 1555. So he was the son of Francisco. So it's a baptized, probably Goan individual that worked as a cook in the Yamaguchi mission in Japan. We know that he belonged to a Portuguese called Duarte da Gama, so family from the famous assassin Vasco da Gama. So he basically gave Francisco to the Society of Jesus, and Francisco married a Japanese woman. Her name was Barbara, and they had 3 children. One was Diogo, Ventura, Pedro, and we also have the name of a granddaughter, Ursula. Duarte da Gama, after living a certain period of time in Japan, he returned to Goa, and from Goa he returned to Europe, and we have also a list of slaves. We have also a list of assassinations that he did, so invasions of regions, etc., and the crimes that he committed, and also the corruption. So he was a kind of a shady human being. But of course, because he was from the elite, so he had blue blood, so he managed to escape all the accusations that were made against him. Anyhow, so about these 3, Diogo, Ventura, Pedro, these 3 individuals, one of them, Diogo, the elder one, became one of the leaders of the Christian mission in Nagasaki, so the House of Mercy, that helped poor people, orphans, women, lepers. Ventura went the other way around. So he apostatized. He was completely against the Christian faith. And in fact, because he had such a deep connection with that Christian community, he started identifying in the city everyone that belonged or was associated with the Society of Jesus. So we have many reports about him, and people lived in fear of meeting him and being recognized by him. So after these two cases, let's go the other way around because we don't have much time and focus our attention on the Japanese presence in Goa. I will start by saying to you, probably you know that, it's not a novelty, that Goa was the center of a very important human trade. So humans were being sold in this city as commodities. And Goa's slave market had several other ones. For example, Macau, Mozambique, Malacca, Lisbon, but many others. So it was a very complex network. So in the city, the center of the slave trade was the Rua Direita Street. We have several descriptions on that street. My favorite one probably is from the French traveler Pirard de Laval. He lived in the city. And when he was writing about his voyages and his experiences in Asia, after living in Goa, he wrote this: Depuis les cas de bonne expérience, jusqu'en la Chine, au Japon, viennent amener leurs marchandises à Goa. So this is broken ancient French, but basically it says that when he was living in the city, he found merchants that came from China and from Japan, and they were in the city markets selling their goods. And describing also the community living in the city, he mentioning many people from Asia, from many nations, he also identified the Chinese and the Japanese, because he wrote, il y a aussi, there is also bon nombre, so a great number, de Chinois, of Chinese, and et Japonois, so Japanese. Let's go now to the city of Goa. So the Rua Direita is this one here, near the Misericordia. In French, Miséricorde, and in English, House of Mercy. This is the place. This place is very interesting, this area. And this is written here in Portuguese. Probably it was drawn by Johan Lichotten, but probably they used Portuguese information. And they have here, it's written in Latin, and it's also written in Portuguese. And it talks about leilão, so auctions. And we see here people buying things. And this is the Misericordia, House of Mercy, La Misericordie. And if we pay attention to it, we will find in the middle this scene, this depiction. And in fact, what we are seeing here, it's a seller what he has on his hands or on his left hand is a ballot, a slave passport, and this woman is in fact a slave. Regarding the passport of Japanese living in Goa, they were of two types, but they contained the same thing. So these passports were in fact made by Jesuits in Japan. So they contained the priest's names, the buyer's name, the victim's name and age, information about the examination of the victim's status and the resolution of the priest, and the place where this examination occurred. Finally, the signature of the secretary or the priest, the person that examined the slave. And we have two types of passports, one called perpetual ballots, so they were slaves, full-time slaves for life, perpetual, and limited time ballots for a period of time. But in fact, when we start studying the multicultural society of Goa, of these invisible people, what I discovered was something that I was not expecting. We find a huge number of Javanese living there. Also, individuals in the documents that I basically analyzed, people from other regions of Southeast Asia, like Amboino, Malacca, Patan, Pegu. I was expecting a lot of people from Malacca, but not from Java. We also find a lot of Chinese living in Goa. So I have a lot of information about them, about their parents, etc. Here, I'm just giving you a short list. And then I found these Japanese also living in Goa. I have many others and many cases that were mentioned by travelers that I included on some of my books, and I will show you that in the end. But I found also these examples that are very interesting. So one of them is the fact that a part of them are not Christians. They are not baptized, even though they have European Christian names, but they are not baptized. Another thing that I was amazed the first time I discovered, I will call your attention to this one, yellow one, Gonçalo Ribeiro. He has a father and mother, Paulo Ribeiro and Felipe Ribeira. So he's from Japan. So I found it very strange, this. So I assumed that he was a second generation Japanese living in the city of Goa. This was my first guess. Now let's connect this Gonçalo Ribeiro to the Americas. And let's focus our attention on the last part of my presentation. So the Japanese from Goa living in the Americas. So for this, we have to go to a census. This was a census that was made between 1607 and 1613. It's one of the first American census. And inside, we find 20 Japanese. This is the census, the original manuscript. And we have information not only about the Japanese, but also Indians, people from India, from China, from Japan. And so basically people that came from the Portuguese networks to the city of Lima. And among the Japanese, I found this couple, Thomas and Martha. So although first they belong to a man called Giuseppe de Rivera. Giuseppe, it's clearly an Italian name, Giuseppe, not José in Spanish or José in Portuguese. De Rivera, so it's a Spanish, so probably he's half Italian, half Spanish. He is a citizen of the city of Lima, so a very wealthy individual. And he had, in this census, a couple of slaves that were working for him. One, the male one, Thomas, and the female one, Martha. They were a couple, they were married, and they looked like Japanese. They presented themselves as Japanese, but they
happened. He's trying to make it stuck. Can you hear? Professor, no, it's not working. I think it may come back. That's it. He has a problem.
Did I resurrect from ashes?
Yes. Yeah, we can hear you now.
Okay.
Yep.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah.
So I will finish my presentation, and my apologies. Probably it's from the
That's
weather.
fine. I mean, it happens. It happens.
So next time I have to travel. But anyway, I'm also just finishing. So, so he was marked as an animal, not as a human commodity, not as a human being. And we also know that they had a 7-year-old child called Francisco. So we see a second generation Japanese living in the city of Goa, but they identify themselves as Japanese. They do not identify themselves as Indians. So how did they arrive there? So again, we have to connect this with the Manila's maritime route. So we also do not know many things about the Portuguese commercial journey to the Philippines. So we know a bit written and studied by Pierre Chonu, but the only person who really studied deeply after him was me. So about 30 years after. So his list was very, very a very simple list, but at least my study managed to make it much more complex. So here is the list. It's a long list of connections. The main thing is that when we start studying this list and the information of these merchants that are arriving in Manila, mainly we know that the main centers of this connection are from Macau and Malacca, but we also have many ships from India, from Goa, that are traveling directly to Manila. And that's from this connection that we will have after a connection from Manila to Acapulco and Mexico City. And in Mexico City, now we have to do another study. We have to study the merchants that are deeply involved in Asian trade. So here we have to study the Portuguese diaspora in Mexico. Why? So if we start studying the provenance of Spanish merchants in the Spanish Indies, we will have this list that you are seeing here. And that all combined show us not only that the Asian merchants are centered in Mexico City, we also have in Lima, so the connection that I was talking about, and Cartagena de Indias, nowadays Colombia, Bogota. But we also have this surprising conclusion that the main merchants that were involved in the Americas on Asian trade are Portuguese. So that's why these people are traveling from Goa and they are arriving here because they are using these networks. So, and with this, I finish my presentation. So I also would like to stress that this presentation, in fact, is a combination of work of 4 of my books. So one was in English, it's the Portuguese slave trade in early modern Japan, where I studied the Chinese, the Japanese, and the Korean slaves. And another 2 books that I made with Professor Oka of University of Tokyo. So about the Daikokai Jidai no Nihonji Indore. So during this period, I'm focusing on the Japanese, but I also mentioned Goa. And finally, the one that I published last year in Korean, where I also talk about Goa, but I mention more the Korean slaves. Okay. So thank you for listening with great patience to me. And I hope you have enjoyed my presentation. Thank you so much.
So, thank you, Professor De Sousa. Can we have a quick question? One question, because we are running behind schedule. None? So you have? Yeah. Yeah.
It was easier for the Chinese to have got Calcutta, Bengal port, because there were a lot of Chinese in Bengal port.
Yeah.
So how come you have said that they went all the way to Goa from China and not to Bengal? Because from Hong Kong, they were easily traveling to Calcutta, West Bengal. Is there any reason you left the Chinese out of your study?
I did not left the Chinese out of my study.
Chinese
I'm just focused on the Japanese in Goa. But they were connected also with the Chinese, with the Javanese. They were a multicultural society.
Okay, thank you.
So thanks a lot,
Thank you.
Professor de Sousa.